everybody, and welcome. My name is Cecilia Luna. I'm one of the assistant directors in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions here at UC Berkeley. We're so happy for you to join us. Today, we're going to answer some questions live. So thank you to all of you who have submitted your questions throughout these last couple of days. So with me today, we have some wonderful people who are going to be answering your questions. So we're going to go ahead and do quick introductions. And then once we're done with introductions, we're going to dive right into those questions that all of you submitted. So with that, let's go ahead and have Pete introduce himself first, Michael next, and then at last we'll have Dominic, and then we'll come back around and we'll start answering questions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pete Smith. I'm an Assistant Director of Admissions International Specialist here within the Office of Undergraduate Admissions, and I'll pass it off to Michael.
Thank you, Pete. Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. My name is Michael. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm also an Assistant Director here with Berkeley's Office of Undergraduate Admissions, and I also serve as part of the diversity team as the Asian Pacific Islander Community Liaison.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dominic. I'm an admission counselor for the Office of Undergraduate Admission, and I'm also a UC Berkeley alum.
So thank you, everybody. So let's go ahead and just dive right in. So for the first question we do have, this one's going to go to Pete. So can you please tell us, Pete, will having a higher IELTS score than the minimum score required improve someone's chances of admission? And if you can just briefly explain what IELTS is for those students who may not know at this time.
Great. Yeah, sure thing, Cecilia. Thanks. So IELTS is one of the many English proficiency exams that we accept to prove proficiency in English. And it is a requirement for one of the requirements for UC Berkeley for fulfilling English proficiency. There are many different ways to fulfill English proficiency. You can do IELTS, you can do another test called TOEFL, you can do another test called Duolingo. You can also fulfill it through AP exams, IB coursework, and language of instruction in your high school. Now, back to the question at hand, will having a higher IELTS score than the minimum improve someone's chances of admission? I hesitate to use the phrase improve someone's chances of admission, rather consider it in a holistic context. Every application we review, we start from the bottom up. We are always adding value to our applications. So having a higher IELTS score will certainly add value to your application.
Thank you, Pete. So with the next question, we're going to stay on the track with more so admission questions as we see them come in. But the next one's going to go to Michael. So I know that the minimum requirement is that 3.0 GPA for those incoming students that are California residents. That non-residents GPA would be a 3.4. But can you speak a little bit more of what is a considered GPA that would be competitive for students who are looking into the Haas undergraduate program? And if so, can you please share your thoughts?
Sure. Thank you, Cecilia. So that's a good question. As she mentioned, the Haas undergraduate program, along with all other undergraduate programs, is a minimum GPA of 3.0 to apply. But of course, the GPA is just one factor out of the several different factors that we look at in the holistic review process. If you really want to look at the details of, a more quote-unquote competitive GPA, you could definitely look at Haas's class profile on their website. So it does list all of the average GPAs that they admit for both freshmen and transfer students that go into the undergraduate program. So you can definitely, again, look at that online at their website. I have in front of me right now, the average GPA for our UC Berkeley students going to the Haas program is about 3.77, right? But you definitely don't want to be too focused on the GPA, right? It is a holistic review process. So we, of course, look at other parts of the application. And so you want to encompass your experiences and your stories applying into the undergraduate program.
Thank you, Michael. So this next question leads a little bit more into just like the factors of the application and how much of that impact of a GPA goes into the application. So with that, Dominic, I know Michael briefly touched on this question, but how big of a factor is the GPA when we review those applications? And can you touch a little bit more as to what other things the admissions officers here at UC Berkeley look at when we look at those applications?
Yes, so it's kind of like stringing all the pieces together we've been talking about. The GPA is one of the factors in the admission process, but UC Berkeley practices holistic admissions, and that means every component in the application that we're asking you to do is going to be equally valuable in your application. And ultimately, we're just trying to stack bricks for you in the process in your application, building a case for you. And some of those other factors are your personal insight questions, your extracurricular activities, and the things that are characteristically unique about you beyond just your quantitative factors.
Thank you, Dominic. And just want to quickly plug in, there are numerous resources for all the students that are joining us today on our website, and also the UC Office of the President website, where we have information about just the general admission requirements, as well as the 13 factors that the UC system uses to review the applications. Whether you're an incoming freshman, transfer, or international student, know that these requirements are all online. There's also a lot of our campuses that are also holding in the UC system application workshops throughout now until the application deadline. So we highly encourage you, while you're here and answering your questions, also dive into those campuses and take a look at those resources that the EAM also have on their website. So thank you for that, Dominic. We really appreciate that response. So this next question is for Pete. So in regards to students who do have mixed records, do we need to write IELTS if we have a mixed high school record? For example, if I have 2 years of international high school.
So the question for Indian students is the ICSE board not approved. So we do accept ICSE exam scores. They are approved for Berkeley. If you are an Indian student, come from Indian National Curriculum, you will need to submit your CBSE or ICSE 10 and your ICSE 12 exam scores. Those are required for admission. So you will need to submit those final documents to us. Now, as far as do we need to write IELTS if we have a mixed high school record? 2 years of international school per se. And back to the English proficiency question, there are several different ways for you to prove English proficiency, IELTS being one of them. Another one is if you attend a school where the language of instruction is English for 3 or more years, you fulfill English proficiency, the requirements through that. In this example, the student was in international school for 2 years, meaning they would not fulfill the English proficiency requirement through language of instruction because it was less than 3 years. So they would have to take IELTS in this situation, or another English exam, English proficiency exam like TOEFL or Duolingo.
Thanks so much, Pete. Now let's take one more question in regards to admission requirements, the GPA factors, and what we look at once we review those applications. So in regards to the personal insight questions, this question is for Michael. Can you just tell us a little bit more whether admissions officers have a preference in the questions that students answer? And if so, can you give some advice for the students who are applying this cycle?
Great question, Celia. And this is definitely a common question that we get at admissions, right? Which of the 8 personal insight questions on the USA application has more quote unquote weight to it, right? They all have equal weight to it. They are all read equally from us readers here and across all the UC campuses, right? So it doesn't necessarily matter which one you choose from. What we would suggest is whichever one you best resonate with, and maybe ones that you have a lot of experience that you can talk about depending on which prompt, right? So again, they all have equal weight to them. We definitely encourage you to look at them all equally and see what best resonates with you and your experiences.
Thank you. And now also leaning more into the personal insight questions, this question is for Dominic. How big of a role do the PIQs really play in the application process? And what tips can you share for the students that are applying right now?
From my experience, I would say they are important because they allow us to know you very deeply. They highlight things that you might be doing in your life that are not occurring inside your extracurriculars and definitely are not occurring inside your academics. And there's a lot of value in it because you're able to show us who you are in a very broad fashion, but also with depth of your experience, both educationally and just in your personal life. And then some of the tips, I know some of you are applying right now, but I would suggest if you haven't already, answer an additional PIQ question. So have a 5th one as an option because you actually don't know which 4 are going to be your strongest responses. So it's good to have a backup and be concise and impactful in what you're saying. So think about the words that you're using in the word choice and take up that full 350 words. You don't want to leaving your application having questions about what was this or why this. Provide all the answers about your experiences when you're doing your application.
Thank you so much, Dominic. This next question is for Pete. In regards to the application system and how students report their grades, can you touch on how students should be reporting the grades if they have different conversions? What is the advice that we give our students if the criteria is different than what it shows here?
Excellent question, and definitely a common point of confusion for many international students because curricula vary drastically across the world. So on the application, you can actually choose the curriculum you're in, whether that be IB or maybe you're in a magnet school or so on. That's step 1. You can choose the curriculum. You can also identify the grading scale. There are several choices, dozens of choices to choose from as far as grading scales, whether that be A through F or A star through F. or through unmarked, 0 through 100, 1 through 7, so on and so forth. Now, if your grading scale doesn't fit neatly into one of those several options, we encourage students to utilize the additional comment section at the end of the application to explain what their academic curriculum looks like and what the grading system at their school looks like. And our admissions counselors will review that information, if necessary, reach out to the school and do further research to evaluate that application. So don't panic, your application will be readable. We will be able to evaluate it, and that will be done by our admissions team.
Thank you, Pete. And just a quick follow-up. I know that there are common questions that we see right now of students asking, what exactly are those international requirements that students need to have in order to apply to the UC system?
That's great. So if you come from a non-English speaking country, of course, you will have to have that English proficiency under your belt, whether that be through testing or language of instruction, as we discussed before. There's also a minimum GPA requirement of a 3.4 GPA. Aside from that, the minimum requirements will be the same across the board as they are for domestic students. So you don't need to expect any additional tests or additional requirements for coursework or the like. Just the minimum GPA and English proficiency, and you'll be good to go.
Thanks so much, Pete. All right, so now that we covered some of the application questions, let's just talk about a little bit more about the student experience here on campus. So in regards to student experience, there are many ways students can find their community once they're here at Berkeley. But one thing that I do want to share is that we do have alum here on the live Q&A. So Michael, if you can just briefly touch on your experience and also tell us a little bit more of how you got involved with our campus. And so did you join any activities, organizations, and how would you go about recommending a student to do so once they're here?
Great, thank you, Cecilia. So yeah, just for context, I did graduate from UC Berkeley about a year ago. I studied political science with a minor in education, so always happy to realize my experiences as a student here at the same campus, right? I would say it's definitely important to get involved on campus. I know it's one thing for students to go to campus, go to college, get that degree, right? But it's also very monumental to get involved on campus, right? And to find your community. That's definitely what I did. I consider myself personally as a very huge extrovert. And so I love, being on campus, finding my own community. We are a campus of about more than 1,200 student organizations. So you have a large plethora of different communities to look into, right? At the beginning of every semester, we have something called Calapalooza, which is pretty similar to club rushes in high schools, right? So a lot of these clubs come onto our plaza on our campus at the start of every semester, and they'll bombard you with a lot of flyers, information, right? So definitely take advantage of that. It can sound overwhelming, but I always tell students that you have that advantage of just, being there and having that chance to see what's in front of you as opposed to wandering where all these clubs and communities are, right? So definitely my piece of advice is to just, dip your feet in other communities, maybe, ask other folks within your classes and see what they've been involved with, because it's a never ending list of things that you can get involved with, right? There's a lot of, again, different communities here. If you're very much interested in your cultural community, you can look into that, right? If you maybe play an instrument or a sport, we have several different opportunities for that. So I would say it's a never-ending list. It is right in front of you, right? You can definitely connect with folks that maybe you are already coming to Berkeley with, or again, maybe folks that you've met for the first time in your classes, right? So very niche clubs as well. For example, I always like to mention that we have a skydiving club, we have a scuba diving club, right? And so maybe you've never done those experiences or hobbies before, and maybe you want to dip your feet into those. But I would say college is a good time to explore new things that you've never been exposed to before. And Berkeley is a great campus for that, right? We have over 40,000 students, both undergraduate and graduate students at our campus. So it's a city within a city.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you for sharing your experience. Super valuable to have that information. And hopefully the students get excited and start researching the type of clubs and organizations they would want to join once they're here. All right, so we're going to quickly go back in regards to the application, and some questions have come in. So bear with us with all the information that's coming your way. So the next question is going to go to Dominic. Can you tell us in the application, now that students are able to select alternate majors, how that's going to work with our review process on our end?
Yes, so students are now allowed to select alternate majors for UC Berkeley, first time in history. For our purposes, we're still going to mainly consider you for your first major. There is a chance in our selection process that we might potentially select you to your alternate major. However, it's mainly going to be to your first major.
Thank you, Dominic. So another question for Pete is going to be in regards to international students and just in regards to just the funds, and even if they are admitted, one question that we have from a student is, as an international student, do you consider the difficulty of the school selection? That's the first question. And then the second question is, if I am accepted and can't afford it, can I delay my spot? If you can just give us a little bit more context as to how you would go about advising a student in this situation.
Certainly. So in regards to, do we consider the difficulty of the school during selection? Every applicant is reviewed within the context of their own school. So we have our counselors who are knowledgeable of the school that you're coming from. We have your school profile on file. We also may be in contact with your school counselors to get a better idea of what your school can offer. In that regards, we will be well aware of the resources that are available to you, the academic rigor that is available at your school. And we would like to see that applicants are taking advantage of those resources and taking advantage of the academic rigor that is offered at their school. So while the level or the competitiveness of the school as a whole is not weighted, that's not considered as part of the application. You're reviewed only within the context of your own school. Now, the second question was in regards to funds. Unfortunately, this is a scenario that happens at times. Students will be admitted to UC Berkeley and will be unable to afford the first semester tuition. In that situation, we unfortunately do not award deferments. So deferment is rarely awarded at UC Berkeley. It's only awarded in extreme circumstances and situations. So do not assume that just by being admitted, you can defer for 1 year and rely on that. Unfortunately, it's not very common to be awarded a deferment.
Awesome. Thank you, Pete. Now, in regards to more so the application, there was a question that came in a little bit more about the majors, and I can answer this. Is the students have to select a major on the application? They do. You do have to select a major. However, there is an option of undeclared if you're still unsure of the major that you want to select. But if you are undeclared, you can select undeclared within certain colleges. So what I do advise all of you tonight who are tuning in, definitely check out guide.berkeley.edu, because it does give you an overview of all the programs and majors that we do offer. That way you can start researching and seeing, at least if you don't know the exact major, perhaps the college that you're interested in. So definitely take a deep dive into that, start looking at those programs. And another great resource is that a lot of these actual departments do have student organizations. So even if you want to reach out to them individually, you can do so, as well as their social media accounts. A lot of them post a lot of exciting research that's being done in their colleges, as well as information sessions that are virtual or even in person. So we highly recommend that if you know your major, select it. But again, once you are a student here, if you are admitted to the College of Letters and Science, just to give you an overview of how it works here on campus, technically you would be admitted as an undeclared major, and you still have that flexibility of taking courses and then declaring your major once you are a student here. So definitely want to make sure that we answer that question because it was just submitted, but ensuring that once you are in the application and if you are applying this year, make sure you make that selection on the application. All right, so the next question is going to bounce back a little bit more into what we have here on our campus and the resources. So for students who are coming to campus, Michael, can you please touch a little bit on what housing options are available? And if so, would you recommend living on campus, and what's available for students here once they're admitted?
Great, thank you, Cecilia. So housing is a cool opportunity to look into once you come to Berkeley. I would consider us as a very residential campus. So a majority of our students do live on or around campus, right? A good majority of students do not drive to school. We all walk to campus or walk to class, or our study halls and all that sort. So it's a great opportunity. In regards to our on-campus residence halls, we have more than 9 or 10 of them, I believe, that students can choose from. And so if you are offered admission to Berkeley, you can get started on a free housing application geared towards specifically our on-campus residence halls, right? So you fill that out, you get to put in information that is helpful for the housing community. And so whether or not, I always say, if you are coming into Berkeley with someone that you might want to live with, you could definitely put that on there and have them live with you. Otherwise, you'll be placed at random with definitely some certain preferences, right? I would say it's a cool thing. It may sound a little bit intimidating, but you might end up finding your best friend for life, right? Or other experiences. So always look into that. We do prioritize housing for our first-year students, right? So they can definitely look into the different options of on-campus housing. And then for transfers as well, we have certain we have this community called Transfer Living and Learning Community based in our Martinez Commons residence halls, right? So that's one entire floor dedicated to just transfers. You get to find that, chance to connect with other transfers from across the state, from whichever community college, right? And get that community-based feeling, right? We also have a bunch of other theme programs. So in certain parts or certain residence halls that we have, there are floors dedicated to just certain communities, right? There is, for example, a women in STEM floor. There is one catered for folks that may be on the LGBTQ plus spectrum. So these are things you can look into. And I always like to highlight for any re-entry students, we also have the University Village, right? So if you are bringing maybe a family with you, children, that is something that you can definitely look into, right? It's called the University Village. And so we always try to cater our housing towards certain communities if that is something that you may resonate with.
Thanks so much, Michael. So this next question is going to be about the application process once more. So Dominic, if you can just give us a little bit more insight. I know I briefly touched on the majors and what students can select, but first, the College of Letters and Science, if you are admitted to the college, would you be, I know there's a pilot program that's happening now for that college, but can you speak on if some students will be able to be admitted directly into some programs in the College of LNS?
I do know that computer science is considering the direct admit to LNS, but most majors in the College of Letters and Science are definitely going to be undeclared at first, and then you're going to have to go through a declaration process, which is going to be based on your major. So each major in the College of Letters and Science, they have a major declaration page, which is going to list out courses that you need to take, GPA minimums that you need to meet to be able to declare. And the declaration process depends on how high demand that individual major is. So some majors that are high demand, they'll make you sign a contract, and some will just be like, hey, you've been taking our courses, looks like you want to be on our major. So it's very dependent. And these are definitely conversations, if you're admitted, that you'll have both with a college advisor and a major advisor about what those steps are.
Thank you so much, Dominic. And if the student would like more information, again, we advise guide.berkeley.edu. That way you can go directly to the department to find those specifics. So thank you, Dominic, for that guidance. All right, so this next question is in regards to the admissions process, and we'll go to Pete. So I know that there have been some changes in the UC system, and students have questions about SAT exams, ACT exams. Can you let us know, are we considering those exams? And if not, what exams should students report on their application?
Yeah, great question. All applicants can rest easy knowing that we do not consider ACT or SAT exams in the admissions process or for scholarships. They are not reviewed in any context, so there's no reason to submit these scores to us. Now, in regards to exam scores that we do review, those are going to be exam scores that we evaluate for credit, meaning you can receive college credit for completing them. That's your IB scores, your AP scores, A-level scores if you're in the British curriculum. Those you will want to report in the application because they can also add value to your application. So you receive college credit and it's added value on your application to include those scores. And of course, if you are an international student, once again, English proficiency test scores. Thanks.
Thank you, Pete. This next question is in regards to extracurricular activities on the application, and it will go to Michael. So Michael, can you touch on how many extracurricular activities should students have? First is the first question. And then two, how should they go about reporting those on the application?
Sure, great question. And so for the folks that aren't too familiar with the UC application just yet, there is an entire section of the application that it asks students to list any activities that they've done both inside and outside of the classroom, right? And we definitely take a look into this, kind of going back to that holistic review process, right? So again, we take our time in reading these. We want to know your experiences during time in high school, if you're in community college, your time at your community college, right? And so particularly on the UC application, there is several sections, I would consider them subsections, where it asks about specific experiences, right? I do believe there's about 5 of them. So if you would like to list down any awards or awards or honors, educational prep programs, general extracurricular activities, volunteer work or community service, and then any work experience, right? So you have a lot of space to put down whatever you've been involved with in these past, couple of years or however long it may have been. And there is no wrong answer, right, to however many you should be putting on your application. We don't necessarily have some sort of system or a list or a rubric of what students should be involved in, right? This is all this space is just for you as a student, as an applicant to the UC system, to tell us what you've been involved with, right? And again, we don't have a rubric. So again, no wrong answer. There are about 20 spaces for each subsection. And so you are more than happy to list or to fill out all of those spaces, or you can maybe just focus on a couple of different opportunities that you've been taking on, right? So again, no wrong answer. That space is really just there for you to tell us your narrative and your story.
Thank you, Michael. And there was a question in regards to the application about senior year grades and how those are considered, and I can answer that. So when students are applying, if you're incoming freshmen, typically you're applying around this time. The application deadline is coming up in close to a month, so November 30th. So once you submit those applications, you are self-reporting 9th, 10th, and 11th grades. So the senior year grades are still in progress. You still don't have any official grades. So what we do is we do consider the rigor of the curriculum for your senior year. And we also look at what type of courses you're taking, because that is a part of one of the factors that we consider. So although we're not going to see those official grades until you've been admitted and after graduation, then just rest assured that you're still going to make sure that you submit those transcripts at the end, and we still are going to hold you to those conditional admissions. So one thing that the UC system does is that when students are admitted in the spring, everyone is pretty much admitted on a conditional admission, meaning that there are certain requirements you still have to make sure you meet, whether that means you completing some courses, having a certain GPA, as well as submitting documents. So the key thing to remember is senior years, you don't get senioritis. Students who come to the UC do not get senioritis. You still have to pass those classes. You have to have those strong grades and keep those courses that you say that you are taking your senior year. So making sure that that's something that you understand now, that although we're not going to see those grades, we will see them once you are admitted in the spring. So definitely want to touch on that for those students who are curious about how that works, because every year the deadline is right before those senior grades are posted. So just rest assured that you're passing those classes and making sure that you're working continuously hard until the end of graduation. So with that, there were a couple more questions that just were submitted. So we're going to go ahead and move on to, we're going to turn back gears and talk about a little bit more about the majors. So for students who are interested in transferring, this question is going to go to Dominic. If a student doesn't get into their first choice major, do they actually have a smaller chance of getting into their alternate major compared to the students who put their first alternate major? I know that a lot of the time students may now have questions because of the first and second selection on the application. So can you just one more time explain to us what that looks like here at Berkeley?
So to reiterate, this is our first year offering an alternate major, so it's kind of hard to answer this question. We have no applicable data to lean on. So right now we're going to lean on, like, we're still going to consider you mainly for your first choice. That's what we've been telling people. It's going to be your first choice mainly. Maybe when the application cycle is over, we'll have more information. So right now, just lean on your first choice. That's what we're going to go for.
Thank you, Dominic. Now, this question was submitted by a current student at another university, and I'll go ahead and take this one. But a student who is interested in transferring to our campus and into specifically the College of LNS, would it be beneficial to retake a course that was already passed for a higher grade? So once, and this is going to apply for all students, once the student takes a course and receives a passing grade, we are going to honor and use that first grade first, regardless if the student is dissatisfied with it. However, if a student takes a course and is a failed grade, a deficiency, an F or a D grade, and then they retake it and get a C, B, or A grade, depending on that, just keep in mind that we will use that second, but it has to be an exact repeat. If you are curious and want to send us an actual question through our contact us form, and you want specifics and you want an actual admissions officer to review the actual course, let us know. There is a contact us form that we're going to submit to you all and just drop in the link for you all to share with other people who may have missed today's live, or if you have questions later on, feel free to contact us. That way we can give you an exact response of what that looks like if that is you in that scenario. But just keeping in mind that once you do receive a passing grade, we will actually be honoring that when it comes to the review process. All right, so with that, we are almost going to wrap it up. So on this last go around, I am going to ask everybody who is here to just briefly share, like rapid fire, some tips for the students that are applying, and just it can be anything about campus, the process, or the application. So we're going to go ahead and start with Pete, then Michael, and lastly with Dominic. So thanks all.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cecilia. So one thing I always advise applicants is to really think of non-traditional things to include in the application. And what I mean by that is non-traditional forms of leadership is a big example. I think when we hear leadership, we tend to, our minds immediately go to these traditional ideas of leadership. I'm the president of National Honor Society, or I'm the captain of my soccer team, my basketball team, captain of this club, or president of this club, and so on. Those are great, and there's a place for those, and it's worthwhile to include those things. But every individual has their own leadership experience in many different ways. That might come from being a conduit between your parents and government offices around, if they're not native speakers of the country that you're living in. That might be taking care of your younger siblings and putting them to bed every night because your parents have to work late. Those are all exceptional forms of leadership that are very worthwhile and need to be included in the application because it adds a lot of value knowing those things about you and knowing your circumstances. So yes, in regard to leadership, yes, traditional is important, but also the non-traditional things are just as important to consider.
Thank you, Pete.
Great. And then I think I want to say something pretty similar to Pete, kind of just follow up on that. Of course, for any students who are watching, you can definitely be confident with yourself and all your experiences. As Pete mentioned, there is a distinction between maybe traditional activities and non-traditional activities, but they're all valid, right? And so we definitely ask you to talk about that. We encourage you to tell us your story and be confident with yourself, right? This can be definitely a very intimidating time of your life when it comes to applying to college. I've definitely been there, right? A lot of us have been there, but just know that we are also human on the other side, right? Your application doesn't go through a machine. It is read by people just like us, right? So just understand it's a very humanistic process. And then just to top that off, right? I always say, even when I was a student advisor, these universities don't make you great. The reason why these universities are great is because of students who are applying to our university. So just be confident in what you're going to be providing to us on the application.
Love that. Thank you, Michael. And lastly, Dominic.
I just want to snap up Pete and Michael's responses. Those are really great, y'all. My final suggestion is really focus in on your application that you're doing right now. A lot of what you've done in the past, you really can't change it. So use the application as a place to highlight everything and all the factors about you. Your grades are in the past that you've already done, like you can't fix them. So take that opportunity that's at hand right now and put forth your best effort to craft the best application that represents you as a whole person.
Thank you, Dominic. And then just one last piece of advice is also breathe, take a break, enjoy your senior year. If you're a senior, if you're transfer community college, also enjoy those moments at that community college because that quickly goes by. And then also use your resources, ask your questions. We're here providing this information, but there are also other opportunities where you can answer your questions. And I know the contact us link was dropped to you all. So this is not the only chance or an opportunity you have to talk to us. There will be other chances as well. And then once you're admitted, we're going to make the process a lot more easier. I know it seems a little intimidating, as Michael mentioned, but we're just here to help you and help this process make it a little bit easier for all of you who are joining us. So with that, I do want to thank all of our panelists who joined us and answered our questions. I do want to thank all of you who joined us and submitted your questions beforehand and live. So with that, we're going to go ahead and say thank you. And we're going to end this session. So if you're able to just quickly just grab those links, feel free to do so. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and go Bears.